Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 10th live airing of Conversations with Cal, a series by the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization. We're really excited to have you all here today, and thank you very much for attending. My name is Gabriella, and I'm a small business specialist here at the OSDBU. I just want to make a few comments before we get started. I'm going to introduce my boss in a second, who will then introduce our guests today. Firstly, you'll notice that if you're not a presenter for this event, both your microphone and camera are muted and cannot be unmuted unless done so by me. Conversations with Cal will be recorded and uploaded to our website. In the interest of time, there will be no question and answer session. However, we definitely still want your feedback. So if you have any suggestions about topics you'd like to hear more about, specific questions you'd like answered in a future session, or individuals you'd like to hear from as a small business, feel free to send us an email at small.business@ed.gov, and we'll be happy to consider any content for the series. Please do keep in mind that all iterations of the series are interview-based in nature. You can submit questions through the chat during the event, but we may or may not present them just depending on timing and flow. Questions that aren't answered today may be answered in a follow-up event or, like I said, via email. Now that you have a better understanding of how this is going to run, let's begin. I'd like to introduce you all to my boss, Calvin Mitchell, or Cal. He's going to introduce our guests. Take it away, Cal.
Thank you, Gabby, and thank you so much to everybody who's out here. I'm really excited. And it's not because I know you're looking at my background and thinking, oh, Calvin is in DC. He's out hanging out on the street corner. I'm actually not doing that. I'm actually in the office, and I'm not on the golf course or anything fun like that. But I am super excited and super stoked because I have Foxhole Technology. For those who may not remember what we're doing here, we're iron sharpens iron, right? We're learning from successful small businesses that are so engaged that they want to give back. How do you become successful in this GovCon space, right? It's extremely difficult, right? But how about if you can learn from some industry experts to kind of reduce your learning curve? And that's how we got Conversations with Cal. It's an interview, very informal, where we're talking and we're just talking about life and how you can grow your business and how so many other successful businesses have grown their businesses. So today I have a special treat. I have Mr. Wes Hester, the Chief Executive Officer, and we're going to do something a little bit different here. We have Tome, who's also here, who's the president of Foxhole Technology. And just to kind of give you a peek at who Wes is, I said, hey, Wes, I love to have you on Conversations with Cal. And he's like, sure, what's Conversations with Cal? And I told him what it was. And no, I'm just joking. He actually has been here before and has tuned in. But no, I said, seriously, I really want to have you as a guest. And you know, the first thing he told me, he said, well, Calvin, I got to have my team. I'm like, no. I only interview the CEOs. I only interview the owners. He's like, I understand that, but my team is what got me to where I'm at. And that just kind of gave me a really good fuzzy feeling because he's not one that kind of, leaves his team behind. He leans forward in the foxhole. You like what I did right there, Wes?
I like it.
He really is a guy who really values his team. And we're going to talk a little bit about his business. We're going to talk about how he grew his business. We're going to understand who this guy Gus is and how he got involved. So first, I'm going to start off by the CEO of Foxhole Technology. Please get your emojis ready for Mr. Wes Hester. He is. I know you could probably tell he from his physique. He's a former wrestler, and he I like how I threw that in there. He wrestled at University of Kentucky, and while he was there, he joined ROTC, and soon after graduation, never looked back. 24 years of career in our military, in the Army, and thank you for your service, by the way.
Cool.
And he rose through the ranks of lieutenant colonel and worked to support DISA, and he's been all over the place, Kosovo, Bosnia, and he's just a world-class gentleman. And then he went and did his hand at industry, and then he decided to start Foxhole, and that's where we're going to start. But we're also going to introduce Gus, who's going to come into our discussion. So it's a little more unique. So, a little challenge, a little different something, throwing a little different spin. But for the 10th episode, we got to keep you on your toes. So Gus helped Wes build this business. And I looked it up and I saw over $300 million, Wes, over the span of time, which is a very successful company. And SBA is not on here, so you don't have to worry about your size standard or anything like that. But Gus has 26 years of experience. And it was amazing when I was talking to Gus and we were talking about his career. I mean, he's worked at Jacobson Engineering, C-level suite, visionary, 19 years in cybersecurity. I was like, hey, what made you decide to join Foxhole? And he said, it's all about the culture, right? And Wes kind of gave him a couple steak dinners too, but we'll talk about that a little bit too. But first, can we get our emojis? Do you know where the reactions are? At the top, in the middle? You got your reactions? Do we have any reactions? All right, there we go. All right, Wes, first and foremost, thank you for being here. So let's talk about what I always talk about originally. Why'd you start your business? It seemed like you were doing pretty well. Retired lieutenant colonel. You started off in industry. What made you start Foxhole, and where did Foxhole come from?
Yeah, thanks, Calvin, and thanks for the intros there. In the military, I always had a passion for giving back and trying to continue that. So when I got out, I went to work with a company that had some family exposure there. Number 6 Software was there for about 6 months with my brother. And the guy who was the CEO there was killed in a motorcycle accident. And when that happened, it kind of leapfrogged us into creating Foxhole Technology about 13 and a half years ago. When we started that, we focused on technology because that's something I did in the military. Coming into the military actually sent me to get some military training in the area of IT and cybersecurity. And so it felt like a good fit. So from the boardroom to the Foxhole, we came up with the name Foxhole Technology, actually in the basement of a friend's house over in Montclair, down by Woodbridge, one night about midnight, then registered the website, and then started from there. The thing I like about it is while we work with both civilian and DoD clients, we feel like we're giving back. Things that we did in the military, we took those same skill sets, that same fire in the eye, and tried to bring it to our current clients and customers.
I was going to say that it's amazing that through this adversity, Foxhole was born. And so what exactly made you choose to start in the IT business? Why did you decide to start there? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so you kind of know what you know. In the Army, I came in, I got different training in the combat arms areas, and then actually because of my undergrad in CS, and I actually decided to get into the acquisition area doing IT. So the Army trained me in doing a lot of the stuff that we do today, from software engineering to cybersecurity. And so I had some of those skill sets. So I wanted to apply those. So that's why we picked the business of IT cybersecurity. We could have picked something that we didn't really understand, like plumbing or electrical engineering, but that wasn't really, the skills that the Army had trained me in. So tried to take what I learned in the Army and apply that to the contracting space. And in a lot of cases, it's worked. I would tell you that a real surprise was when I first came out. I retired out of DISA, Defense Information Systems Agency. That was my last assignment. And I remember a lady who was a mentor there, a small business office, Sharon Jones, and some of you may know Sharon. She said, Wes, don't expect to come in here and get a prime contract because all your buds are going to, say, you're radioactive, stay away from you. They don't want to be perceived as giving you something that you didn't deserve. And so literally it took us 3 years to get our first prime contract at DISA. Now we have several there, but it took a while. And our first prime contract was with the agency we had no understanding of until we got in there, and that was the Federal Aviation Administration. But we found there were a lot of similar skills that we did on the DoD side that applied to their mission at the FAA. They had a real world mission.
And so, question for you, Wes. So did you start, like when you started the company, did you initially start right into federal contracting, or did you start on the commercial side and shift into contracting? Can you talk a little bit about, because a lot of companies are wondering, like, how do you start?
Yeah, so initially we started on the industry side. We started working as a subcontractor at Blue Cross Blue Shield in Columbia, Maryland, and we were doing service-oriented architecture work there. It was good work. It was a good bill rate. However, it was a little volatile. Our contracts were renewed every 3 months, but we didn't think that was a problem because everyone said they always do that. The vice president that we were working for got relieved during our course there, and so one day at lunchtime, I got a call that our guys were told to report to HR and to leave the building. And so they literally showed up with a shoebox, said, "Put everything in your box," and they walked him out.
Oh my goodness.
That was a shocker. So industry, I found that it was sometimes easier to get into than the federal, but it was also easier to get out of. You can be fired in a moment's notice, where on the federal side, it's not like it's an annuity, but it's still, there's more security, there's more regulations that kind of protect you once you win a contract and you're there. I've never had that happen on the federal side so far, but that was an eye opener. So we then said, we've got some experience on the federal side for what we did and some of the other folks in the company. So we started looking at federal contracting. So we took what we learned, the IT, the cybersecurity, and we started looking at federal contracts. And we haven't looked back since. We've been very successful and blessed and growing since then. Yeah.
So you made the pivot, right, from Blue Cross and Blue Shield. So I guess the Shield didn't protect you that much, but so you made the pivot. You made the pivot over to the federal government, and so you talked about DISA wasn't the first contract, even though you did have some roots there. Can we talk a little bit about how that first contract happened? Did you go through subcontracting? What did you do?
Yes, so we actually at the FAA, when our first prime contract, we did go in there and start meeting with the small business office, started meeting with the client. Really, we look at it as a three-legged stool, if you will. You've got to have a relationship with the contracting office, the small business office, and with that mission partner, that client. And so we started going in there and working at it. And then one day, someone who actually had been a guy I knew on the federal side said, "You should come in and look at the EFAS contract, and you should come in and look at some of the work we're doing in cyber." And so he made an introduction. We went in. They were impressed with what we were doing and our past experiences. And they actually gave us a sole source contract as an SDBU there at the FAA. That was our first prime contract.
Wow.
Very blessed. It was 2 people. And within a year, we grew it to 28.
Wow. That's tremendous growth. And I say all the time, I think it's important to know your customer, right? Because there's certain rules and regulations that we have here, like at the Department of Education, and we follow the FAR, but there's a lot of contracting shops that don't follow the FAR, right? They have acquisition manuals, and those acquisition manuals allow them to do different things in terms of contract terms, right? And so that's fantastic. And so now you got this contract, you scaled up pretty quickly. Then what was next?
Well, then we took you build on your past performance. And, I go back to the old adage that, if people are just looking at the federal procurement sites and the GovWin and bidding on contracts that just happen to come out there, or they're, finding out about a contract that's coming out in 2 weeks and bidding on it, the probability of winning that is very low. It's not that anyone's cheating or doing wrong, but people want to work with people they know, they trust, they like, and they know you have that past performance and you do a good job. As a federal guy, why would I give you $1 million to do something if I don't know anything about you, you've never done any work for me, and you don't have any past performance? There's a risk. So you've got to go in and get to know the client, find out what their needs are, what their requirements are, and it may take 6, 12 months to do that. It's a marathon. It's not a get rich overnight kind of schema where you're just going to bid on something. Now, you'll hear about folks who bid on this contract, the day before it's due and win it, blue herring, we call them. But that's really the exception. It doesn't happen that often. You'll waste a lot of time.
And I think that's good to talk about, right? Because a lot of people they go through the process and they get discouraged, right? But I think it's important for them to know that relationships do matter. And I like the idea of that three-legged stool, right? Getting to know different areas within the organization seem to bode well for you. So you got the first contract, you started to scale up that contract. Then what happened next?
Well, we became, subcontractor for various companies. I would tell you that early on, and we kind of laugh about it, we have a bookcase in our office with all these subcontracts that we were on, but we never had any work share. But early on, they would be some type of past performance. You could say I'm on the Army ITES contract or the DISA Encore contract as a subcontractor, but you had no work share. So we did that for the first couple of years where, the big guys would add us to the contract because we were, SDBO, or they'll add you because you're an 8A or woman owned or so forth. And it gives you a license to hunt, but it really doesn't give you any work share. And in a lot of cases, those big guys and gals aren't going to give you work unless you bring someone to the table or you set up a meeting for them. They see that you're trying to grow business on using their contract. They'll probably never call on you unless, even if they do have work share goals, very few contracting officers, don't take this the wrong way, and my friends at the Department, but they don't push and make sure that every year that those numbers are being met. It's typically once the proposal goes in, they check the box and that's done. So we started growing it that way, and then we finally won another contract at Department of Education, and then we won another prime contract at DISA. And then that started really building our portfolio where folks would say, seriously, you guys can do this work and you've got past performance, both as a sub and a prime, and you've run a couple BPAs, blanket purchase agreements, and IDIQs. And they said, you've got the breadth to manage those. And so we started scaling. And in that scaling, there's something, really inherent there. You'll find a lot of folks will start a company. There'll be a couple of smart technical folks, or they'll understand the business model, but they'll forget about what I say is the most important thing, and Gus will say the same thing here, is that you've got to have a strong back office. You can't scale if you as a CEO or you as a president are out there billing every day and working, in the trenches, if you will, because you're going to miss, payroll, you got your HR, your legal, those things are going to sit you on your head if you don't have people that are already lined out to do that type of work, whether it's a agency you bring in or whether it's someone you hire to help you. So the first thing we did when we started the company, we brought in a CFO, and we had three of us, and then we all wore three different hats. And then Gus came on, and we really started, moving to more of a run phase. We were kind of in that crawl phase, and then a walk phase, and now we're getting between a walk and a run right now, I say. So you've got to have that back office support. Very critical.
Yeah. So I want to talk to that, and Gus, I'm going to tee you up soon to bring you into the conversation. But let's talk a little bit about that subcontracting, because I always say subcontracting is a good way to start. But I know oftentimes businesses come back to me and say, "Hey, Calvin, they're kind of shorting me in the deal," and I'm at a loss of words to say. What would you say to small businesses that may find themselves in that situation? Because you talked a little about a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we have Gus has developed a bid, no bid process. So one of those things is, if we're going to be a sub to someone, what type of work share are we going to get? And you want to get that in writing. That's very important. No handshakes. I've got like I said, we've got a bookcase full of contracts that we had handshakes or even buddies who said, we'll take care of you once you win this. Just sign on. We'll use your past performance. We'll win it. And then we'll take care of you. And then things happen. The guy retires. The guy gets fired. All intentions were good, but it falls apart. So you've got to have it in writing, so it flows down to that sub K once you win the work. And we typically look at it two ways. One, if you want to have a swim lane, if they won't give you a work share percentage, so we'd say give us the cybersecurity support or the pen testing or define it. The other thing is we'd like to have a work share of X% of the revenue dollars that the contract generates. And so those things kind of make it more sticky for you. The other thing on BPAs and IDIQs, you'll have companies will say, well, we don't want to give you any work share on the IDIQ or the BPA, but once we win it, we'll take care of you. Well, we've signed on to a couple of those, but then we'll add a caveat that within 1 year, if we haven't done any work with you on this IDIQ, which there's 100 other bidders, then we become non-exclusive so that we can actually work possibly with other companies. We're not locked in. They haven't taken us off the street. So those are some things, the tactics and techniques that we kind of use as we go forward, because, people have all good intentions, but in the end, if it's not in writing, it sometimes gets miscommunicated. That's a nice way of saying people aren't greedy, but they get miscommunicated. and Gus has a perspective as a big business, could probably add something to that. I don't.
Yeah, Gus, what are your thoughts? Oh, first let me. So hold on, Gus, before you go in. Okay, so Wes is building a company, right? The company is growing, and then Wes, you say what to yourself?
I said, how do we continually scale? And we need to start bringing in the right people. No one man or person or woman can build this. You need a whole team. And so we started looking at how to bring in a team. Fortunate, I had known Gus. Actually, when I was on active duty, I met Gus in Colorado Springs at U.S. Northern Command. He was actually a contractor, came in, and I met him then, was impressed. And then we stayed in contact over the years and watched how he went to small business after small business, grew them, either sold them, and then went to Jacobs. And so when the opportunity was right, I reached out to Gus, and yes, many steak dinners. Jackson Steakhouse is our favorite. Said, hey, drink the Kool-Aid and come over to a small business named Foxhole Technology as the president. And he did. So we're very fortunate to have him.
All right. So Gus, are you a I'm thinking are you a sirloin guy, porterhouse? What was it that got you?
I told you earlier before, I'm an equal opportunity carnivore. So, but all kidding aside, the steak dinners, and it took him, I would say it took Wes probably a good 3 or 4 years before I finally said, okay. And part of that was, as he said before, I have grown small companies to the size, as large as almost 250 million, where I came in at almost an $8 million number and grew them up. And then I ended up at Jacobs Engineering. I had never worked at a large company before because they acquired one of the companies that I had grown. And so through that acquisition, I had only really planned to stay a very short period of time because I'm not no offense to any of the big companies. I love the small business feel. I like the energy. I like the culture that it brings. I like the relationship. Although Wes leans on me a lot for, the structure and growing and putting the right processes and mechanisms in place. I hate process. I hate anything that I have to layer on stuff, but you need it because you got to have that discipline. You got to have that mindset in order to scale. And if you don't do those things, you're going to fall flat on your face because you're not going to be able to pick up the ball. Like I tell a lot of the employees and leaders in Foxhole, I'm not a surfer, but I appreciate when you're looking for that wave to ride. If you don't have the board in the right place, you're not ready to spring on your feet. You're not seeing the waves as they're coming to you, and you're going, okay, that's the one I'm going to ride. You miss the wave or you fall flat on your face, right? You totally wipe out.
Wow.
And so it's really, really important for smalls to realize that it's important to understand there's got to be a good balance of the right culture of people, the right processes in place because you don't want to choke yourself, okay? And one of the big driving principles of Foxhole is easy to do business with. You got to be easy to do business with. That doesn't mean let people take advantage of it. It means you got to be very collaborative, and that's what you need to portray not only to your business partners, but to your customers, the contracts, the ops folks, the small business office. If they look at you and go, wow, this is a great company, they've got good business ethics, they got good processes, and they're easy to do business with, that's where that relationship really kind of takes off, right? So going back to the large company, I mean, no offense to Jacobs Engineering, I was ready to, move on to go back to smalls because that's what I really, really enjoyed. I have a lot of acquisition experience, and that was another area that Wes was like, hey, I'm at this point. Should I sell? Should I grow? What should I do? You got a lot of experience in here. And, we created an ESOP. So we sold, but we didn't sell to a big. We sold to the employees.
Wow.
And so we became an employee-owned company. And then that way, upon the acquisition or wherever we go, it is all the employees that benefit from that, not just Wes Hester or his business partners. Right. And so I go back to the culture piece, because that's an awesome culture to have, where every employee, we say to them, well, what do you want to do? Because, by the way, you're an owner, right? So let's think about what you're getting ready to do, what you're getting ready to pitch to a customer, whether it be organic growth or that proposal you're going to work on. You've got a very heavy hand in everything that happens. I mean, you're a vested interest in this, right? And so that's where I think, to answer your question, kind of in a long-winded way, but it's that dynamic that makes the team very, as Wes pointed out, it's not one individual, it's not one particular group over the other. That symphony, if you will, has to play on a very strong sheet of music to include your partners and your relationships with your government entities.
So let me ask you, I have a two-part question. One, I love this idea of culture, and I spoke a little bit earlier about what kind of made Foxhole different, right? And the fact that you really wanted to kind of share the wealth in a lot of ways, right? With the company, with the employees, says a lot about you, and how you really set that culture. And I know, Gus, when we talked earlier, that culture was everything. How would you guys say, right? Because, like, Wes, how did you afford a Gus, right? Like, how would someone who's a small business, who's starting out, be able to get someone like Gus to join the team to help them to grow the business? And Gus, what was the thought process for you on the other side?
Sure, Wes, you want to go first, or?
Sure. Yeah, I can go first. So recognizing that the same folks that start a company are not necessarily the same folks are really going to take it to where it needs to go. You have to realize your skills. There's different skill sets to really, get it, start up to where it's a medium sized or a large business. And so I recognized that early, and a smart person told me that, didn't just, figure it out on my own. I'm a dumb Army guy, but someone told me that. But it's important to recognize that, and you do have to surround yourself with the right people. So if you were to look at our back office, we have a contracting person that's very seasoned. Our CFO, has done a lot of CFO type of stuff and accounting stuff. You build the right team, your recruiter. You start building those things out, and then you recognize you've got to have the right leadership team to do that. And so, like I said, I had a relationship with Gus. I would tell you that if you're looking at hiring someone as a VP or director or senior person, you don't do it on LinkedIn, or you don't just do it over the, a couple weeks. You need to start looking now in anticipation that you need to bring these right people in. Start nurturing those relationships. It's like a marriage. A lot of people look good on paper, but until you actually work with them or get to know them, they may not fit within your culture. And so I knew Gus was a great fit for our culture. I knew I'd watched what he'd done with other companies. So we started nurturing that relationship. We started dating, if you will, right? And it's like a marriage,
Right.
And so,
Right.
I'm happily married, but Gus, and I are like that.
Yeah.
And so,
but it's important though, right? Because a lot of times you hear companies getting really bad deals, and owners, being a little skittish, if you will, right? Because of that relationship. But it's good to know that sometimes you kind of have to be patient, right? Because it would have been easy for you to say, "Hey, Gus, come on over," and just go, right? But it did take time to make sure that was the right decision. And you said you made that you did the same process for in other ways too. So I guess, growing and scaling up is a process, right? And you should plan for that as well, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't happen overnight. Like I said, we started talking, years out, and and you have to look at that, and you have to say, okay, if I need a senior person in my company, I may be only this size today, but in 6 months or a year, if I grow, what's it going to take to be able to afford to bring someone on? And there's risk. I mean, fortunately, we've continued to grow and we've been blessed, but there is risk when you make that decision about bringing a senior person into the mix. How do you afford them? How do you pay for them? How do you incentivize them? So,
Right.
there's for us, there's a base, but then there's incentives if we grow to this level, if these things happen. So you have to look at that on, for each company is different to figure out what that cost is. But for us, it worked, and I think it was the right decision. And again, you have to have a good fit. It's a marriage, and if you don't have that good fit, it's not going to work no matter what. So you have to fit together. Gus, I don't know if you had anything else to add to that.
I do. I'm going to ask Calvin a question because he's used to asking the question.
All right.
Right. So Calvin and the audience that's here, what is the most important, the number one thing in your company? What do you think is the most? Is it getting your contracts compliant? Is it doing everything the government tells you to do? Is it turning a profit? I mean, what is the number one defining thing, most important thing in a business?
So I'm going to say employees, but I want everybody else to put their answer in the chat. Our staff, human capital, building relationships, building the right team.
Yeah.
Who else? Who else? People. Now, you guys don't have to say that because I said it. Culture.
No right or wrong. Yeah.
All right. Relationships.
These
Keeping
are
our employees
all great.
happy. Culture.
You guys are right on it. Okay. Because the number one thing in all the successes I've had in every company and I've grown, it is the people that is the most vital thing. Everybody that's in here isn't trying to sell a product. You're selling people and the capabilities and the services and the engineering and the relationships associated with that. So if you're in the water business and you have no water, guess what? You have no business. Right? It doesn't exist. Right. Yep. And your ability to deliver on that mission, because I've heard people say the mission is the number one focus of a company. I would tell you that it's number two, possibly number three, because if you take care of the people and you drive that, you drive the innovation, the delivery style, the relationships they build with the customers, and it's building that brand. And if you don't build that brand, you have no business. Right. There's a lot of companies that unfortunately they win work and they can never deliver, huge staff turnover, lots of problems, a lot of culture related issues, and they struggle to deliver. And both the customer suffers, the company and the people suffer, and inevitably, I don't know of anybody that's on this call or on this meeting that is tax exempt. So then the taxpayer pays for the fact that we didn't do what needed to be done. We didn't accomplish the mission, right? Yeah. So when you think about how as a small business I position myself, like Wes said, it's building those relationships. People like to do business with people they understand, they trust, they have a good relationship, and they're taking care of their people, right? That is the number one commodity. And so as I've seen companies succeed and fail, that's probably one of the biggest things, that you have to focus on your people. Listen, you're small, you can't afford everything, right? But you gotta be, it's kind of like, do I get into a marriage after only dating this person for 2 months? Yeah, maybe that might work. But if you're going to be making those strategic moves at the very senior level, it's very, very different. You got to really keep an eye on those folks. And LinkedIn and the resume pirates, as I like to call them, they're going to tell you whatever you want to hear. But at the end, it's really what they do that makes a big difference. And I saw somebody ask a question for Wes, so I'm going to pause there.
Yeah, and it's a really good one. And generally, I don't take questions from the field, but this one's too good. Wes, at what point did you decide to go from working in the business as billable to working on the business, non-billable, working on back office stuff? Can you talk a little bit about that balance and what it was like?
So initially on day one, it was myself and my wife. She was actually, you find people who work cheap. So family members tend to, you pull them in. So for the first year, I don't know if I mentioned it, we couldn't take a paycheck. And then we grew it to about 4 people. And I'm paying these folks, what I consider really good paychecks. And I'm still not taking a paycheck for about 1.5 years. And my wife's going, what'd you get me into? But then we started growing it. So from day one, I didn't take a paycheck. And I didn't work for a client. I actually was fortunate to hire some folks to start doing things. And I will tell you that I did some resume fishing. I put my resume out, for instance, at OSD, where they needed someone with acquisition IT experience. I went in and they said, we'd like to hire you. I said, would you be willing to bring someone else in my place? I've got someone else that's better than me. And I was fortunate. We were able to flip it that way, and I kept managing and kept trying to grow things. It's really hard if you're billing even 50% of the time to grow and scale. You just get distracted when you've got the client. Now, I will tell you, there's times when I'll jump in and out. We had a situation last year where I needed to jump in to be the PM for a program for about 3 months while we were going through a transition and some growth. So, you get your hands dirty, you do things. I've jumped in and written a little code here and there, things, but realistically, and that's only because we had Gus, but when you're starting to grow it, it's tough to be billable and to grow your business. You're going to miss things. I would tell you, if you're currently billable, try to backfill your position as quick as possible with someone that you can put in there, which will allow you then to step out and grow and do the other things for taking care of the business, or things are going to fall apart. I mean, I can tell you horror stories of other companies I know who the owners or CEOs or presidents were billable. They had issues in the back office, and they were just, had 10-hour days at the work with the client. Then they'd come home, and it was really tough. And if they have small kids or if they have a family, it gets really tough. I mean, I talk to small businesses all the time. We'll go have coffee if a guy or gal wants to start a business, and first thing I ask them is, "Do you have small kids?" And they go, "Yeah." And I go, "And you're going to start a business?" And yeah, it's I hate to say this, and I'm not proud of it, but I missed a lot of anniversaries, a lot of kids' birthdays, a lot of different things. It's tough when you start out, so
Yeah.
It really is.
But I think that's important, Wes, right? Because we got to be fully transparent, right? Like, hey, you had to get free labor where you could get free labor, and luckily your wife not only ponied up her time and she stuck with it, right? And sometimes you gotta use what resources you have, but I think it's good too to realize that you can't be all right, because I see some companies and they're like, hey, it's just me. And I was like, well, at some point, there's got to be more than just you, right? Because I would love to advocate for you, but I don't want to put you in a position where you would be, where you would fail, right? And that's the reality. I think it's good that when we're talking about scaling up and growing. So, Gus, when you came in, there were a couple of contracts under the belt of Foxhole.
Mm-hmm.
What did you decide to do next to grow the company? Did you do GSA schedule? Were there were there other contracts that you tried to build upon? Can you talk a little bit about what was the next generation for growth? How did you decide to grow that was a sustainable growth too, right?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. So one of the first things I sat and I did was I became a kind of a strategic advisor for the company for a couple of months while I watched how things worked, how the mechanics of things. And Wes was like, no, I want to get you to be the president right now. I want to do a blast out and a press release, whatnot. And I said, it's really important because you don't want to rock the boat, but by the same token, I think there are some great processes that were already here. There's some great things that were already here. And unfortunately, what ends up happening a lot of times, you'll bring in a big senior leader and then they just want to just wipe I want to do this, I want to do this, without actually really learning the business and understanding, hey, where are the relationships? Where are the strong performers? Where are there potentially problems? There's a lot of sage advice that comes to, if it ain't broke, don't try to fix it, right? And so when you think about that, there's a lot of value in that. And so I spent the first couple months just kind of taking a look, seeing how things were, getting a real good feel of who the leaders were and where the players were and where there were areas that needed to be investment. Then from there, I sat down with Wes and said, okay, we're at this phase. I think you have the ability, based upon what you've asked me to do. You don't want to sell, but you do want to do something for the employees and you want to grow. So we need to make some investments, right? And have you considered these types of investments? Have you looked at your portfolio and where we can make some of those investments? And so we invested in a growth team. And that growth team is not just hiring a bunch of business development people. It was actually hiring subject matter experts in particular key areas, okay, that could kind of grow Foxhole to the next point. Because when you're a service-disabled veteran-owned business or an 8A or a woman-owned small business, at the smaller levels, people want you because you have that designation. As you larger and larger, before you hit the caps, you need to have something that identifies you and really brands you. As I tell employees all the time, if you can't address the question of why Foxhole, then you're never going to be able to address it for a customer or an employee.
Wow.
Right? Why would I want to come here? Why would I want to invest in you? Because when the government issues you a contract for $500,000 or $500 million, that's an investment in you. They're staking that money and their credibility on you're going to perform that work. So if we can't address that reasons as to why, and as Wes pointed out, you have to, not only as the CEO, but you need to look at your leaders and say, I may have a tremendous resource, but if that resource is working 10 or 12 hours a day, just trying to, with the multiple hats, they're never going to be able to move and scale the company in the next direction. So we made a couple investments in a few areas. And yes, it's a risk, and yes, it's a gamble. But by both leveraging the why Foxhole and making some strategic investments where that rubber band is not so stretched so thin, because you put it out, as an example, one of the big problems that a lot of companies have, customers have, is the customer says, I've got a problem, but man, I have no idea how to solve this problem. I think it is, but I'm not exactly sure. Every large company will tell you, well, just buy booze into GD and we'll wave the magic wand and all your problems will be fixed. One of the benefits of being a small is you can be very agile. You can be very intimate with the customer and say, let me dig into where your real challenges are. And by having the thought leaders and SMEs and being able to bring those real people. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, we had a customer within DHS say to us, I have talked to 12 companies that tells me they got all these great capabilities and these real tangible things, these demos and these SMEs. In 4 years, I've never seen one of them.
Oh, wow.
And we said, I'll tell you what, how about we do kind of a mini industry day for you and your constituents on the federal side. You don't have to pay for it. We'll come up and you'll meet with our SMEs. We'll show you some of the innovations that we've done for some of our customers. Obviously, we've got to scrub some of that because some data you can't share outside of that. And they were just astounded. And that has been another area where smalls, you're always looking for that next big win. Some that win is right in your own backyard by working with the customers and looking at organic growth. How can I leverage and make some of the problem sets for that particular customer easier, right? Because if I make them successful, chances are they're going to make you successful. And so while we have new growth targets, which was one thing that small companies tend to do, is like, I got to win that next vehicle. I got to win that next contract. Once you start working in that environment, organic growth is equally, if not as more important than net new growth, because that creates a tremendous amount of stickiness with that customer. It provides an advocate when someone calls Calvin and say, hey, I'm calling you from the Department of Energy, and I'm just making that up. Can you tell me about this company Foxhole? I mean, what are they good? They're great. They deliver on what they say they deliver. They bring in folks. You're never going to be able to do that if those real key resources that you're making invested in, as Wes said, are 100% utilized or 120% utilized because they're stretched too thin, right? You got to, as leaders of the organization, got to realize, just because I'm the CEO or just because I'm the president or I'm the ops director, hey, let me step in and help those individuals out so they can help to the next generation. I will tell you that one of the other things that I'm a very, very stout supporter of is being truthful, transparent, and promotion from within. Nothing burns me more when I was in the trenches or in the foxhole, no pun intended, doing work that I would work for these companies and then they would hire my new boss or hire some new people, that used to just demoralize me so much. Okay. And customers come to me and say, Gus, you should be the one really doing that. Why'd they hire? Well, the paper says this, and the contract says that. But if you can show your customers that you can do that job and you invest in your people and you build upon that, before you know it, you've got the next tenet of leaders who are very, very loyal to the brand, who go out and sell and are enthusiastic, because that type of energy is contagious to your customers, to other people, to get referrals and bring them into your culture and your company. And that's why culture is so important. right? So I don't know if I answered your question, but those are some key things that are really important. And as a small, I'll end with, it's very hard that when you lose a contract, because let me just explain something if you haven't realized it yet, because contracts come and contracts go. It's just the nature of the business.
Yeah.
But reputation and your brand is the biggest thing that nobody can take away from you. I mean, that's really, really important. Okay.
Yeah.
When you lose a contract, if you can hold on to some of those people and show them they're not there just for the contract, you can plug and play them into other areas. You will have an employee for life. And I can tell you over the last 3 years, I've seen more employees return to Foxhole from other contracts that we've lost because they know that we take care of them.
Yeah.
And in fact, we had a customer out of Ardissa. We lost that contract. It decided to go a different direction. Those employees came back to us and said, when you have an opening, I want to know about it. I don't care where it is. It could be in DOD, the IC, Feds. I want to come back. And they did. And we have a great metric that we have where we rehire some of the same talent over again.
You know what's fascinating about that is I do hear sometimes from small businesses that, hey, Calvin, the labor force is really tight, right? And we're all collaborating over the same people in some ways, right? So the whole idea of creating this culture and this culture just permeating through the whole organization, I think is what is the best way to really get the retention, but also get the best out of the employee too, right? Because at the end of the day, you want the best output out of the employee, right? Because in federal contracting, especially in service contracts, people are gold. Because that is exactly what people interface with.
We're on the people business. Yep, we're on the people business in the end, and it's about taking care of those people.
Yeah, as Wes pointed out, I mean, just think about it. I mean, I was on a contract with the National Security Agency, and he was still in uniform there at Northern Command, and we've known each other for all these years, but I still consistently run into folks that have known Wes for years, right? Wow. And people that we bring into the organization we've known for years, and they're always like, you have an opening for me? I'd love to come work for you. To me, that's a true testament. Regardless of where you go, regardless of what contract, you have the loyalty, and that's the brand loyalty of the most important asset, which is the people.
Yeah, and Calvin, to extend on that, we've had experiences where we were the prime on a contract, the FAA, and we had a sub who actually, I got a call from the client one day and said, your sub's up here with their CEO and wants to have a meeting with us. And I said, let me put him on the line there. And he goes, yeah, we just happened to be in town. Wanted to introduce him. Okay, I guess that's okay. Hour later, I get a call back from my client, the government guy, says, they just gave me a briefing on how they can do it faster, cheaper, better if they go directly to them versus Foxhole.
Oh, wow.
Now, that was a relationship was very short-sighted on their part because we'll never work with that company again.
Right.
They were trying to get rich overnight rather than the marathon of working together. And by the way, we still have that work today, and we're continuing on it. So, relationships are so critical in this business. And
it's interesting you say that because a lot of times I'm focusing on it when I'm talking to small businesses from the perspective internally, right? Like I always say, like your relationships are gold, right? Because they're going to be what's going to help you to get that next contract, that next opportunity. But it's fascinating because even on the outside, right? When you're working, where you're doing B2B, right? You're the same thing. Those relationships are so critical, so critical.
Yep.
Gus, did you have something?
No, I didn't want to. I want to make sure Calvin. I have a couple extra questions I can ask you, Calvin, if you want to be in the spotlight. But
sure. Hey,
much away from you, buddy.
If you know me, I don't shy away from the spotlight, and those who know me, I can't hide very well. I tried.
To kind of go back to your original question is, what was in it for me? For me, I came from a very large company. From an equity perspective, I've bought and sold companies. When I was at Jacobs, I managed a $1.3 billion P&L. I bought 6 companies while I was there during the 3 years, and I was the global leader of cyber across the globe for a fairly large company. But none of that, it pales in comparison to the relationships, the culture, the small business feel. I loved that portion of it. So I would offer to any other owner that's out there that's looking at whether I make an investment or not, you got to make sure that the person that you're courting want to also put skin in the game, which means, hey, I'm not going to command the same salary and equity that I may have in this big mega company, right? I got to be also bought into what I'm trying to do and want to be able to say, hey, I want to do this, right? And so when I was looking at the cadre of companies of where I might go, and Wes is dangling those steak dinners, if you will, like, hey, have you tried this version of the steak? It was less about the steak and it was more about the relationship. It was more about what's the culture and the people, and am I gonna have the ability to really, make an impact? And that means me investing in the company as well, not just monetarily. That also means my relationships. As we've talked about, relationships are very important. Wes calls me up and says, hey, we got an opportunity over here. Do you happen to know folks over there? Yeah, let me pick up the phone. And I've got a Rolodex of people, and I'm going to be, investing my relationships into where I'm going as well, right? And that's equally the partnership that makes up that foxhole, right? We used to call it Foxhole 2.0. As we merge from the next level to the next version, putting kind of a software update. It's not a security patch, it's not a critical fix. This is a real change from like Windows 95, and I'm dating myself, to Windows 98, right? I mean, it's a fundamental change, right? And that isn't just me coming in on a big high horse and saying, okay, we're going to change all these things. No, it's looking at the organization as a whole, the relationships and the capabilities, right? So.
Wow.
Hey, Calvin, to add to that,
Yeah.
if you were to look at our portfolio, we've got work at DHS, TSA, DISA, FAA, Department of Education, Department of State, OSD. If you look at that, in every instance, we have good business partners that we work with. We have no contract where we're just the only company on that. So we typically have tried to find the right business partners to work with and try to do that over and over. And, it's a relationship. So it's not just our corporate culture. We try to extend that to our partners. And we have a couple of JVs that we've recently stood up as well to try to build that and extend that. So finding the right companies to work with is so critical, and being fair to them and treating them right and them treating you right is so critical in this business. And it kind of extends what Gus was saying.
I got a text from Gabby saying I had a 4-minute warning, and that was probably 5 minutes ago.
So, sorry about that.
So no, this conversation has been good. So Wes, Gus, can we commit now to a part 2?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
All right, Gabby, I'm gonna turn it back over to you guys. Thank you so much for your vulnerability and being very open and candid. I've been seeing a flurry of great comments in the comment section. And again, thank you for your support. And Gabby, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. And like Calvin said, thank you so much to both of you for coming today. We really appreciate having you on here. And thank you all to the audience for attending today as well. I hope that you all were able to gain something from this. And eventually we will have this uploaded to YouTube. You may or may not have noticed, we do have a couple of episodes now up on YouTube from our original beginning of the series. So feel free to check those out. And email us if you do have any more questions. I'll put our email in the chat, but it is small.business@ed.gov. I certainly wish you all the best of the rest of your day and a wonderful weekend.